Hello there everybody, welcome back to the channel for one of the first of my horror franchise ranking videos. I'm going to be ranking all of the Chucky movies from worst to best here today. Make sure you subscribe so you can follow along with the rankings I have coming for all the other horror franchises we're going to be talking about. And of course, make sure you like the video and comment your rankings down below as well. So the Chucky franchise, or the Child's Play franchise, is a little bit newer one for me. I had seen Child's Play 1 and 2 prior to this year, but this year I ended up watching 3 through the remake recently, so I have a pretty fresh perspective on these movies. And with the Child's Play franchise, we don't really have any movies that are embarrassingly bad, in my opinion. They're all watchable in their own ways. And so when we start with this franchise, we're gonna go first to a couple movies that I do think are just generically bad. And coming in at number 8 for me is going to be the Child's Play 2019 remake. Now, I know there are a lot of people who are fans of this movie, and I don't think this movie is really all that bad as a killer AI movie. But to me, this movie doesn't really do any of the things that make the Chucky franchise unique or different than other horror movie franchises. This feels like the most generic modern remake you could possibly have for this franchise. Mark Hamill does a commendable job as Chucky, but he's never really able to give his own unique life to the character. The character is held back constantly by the traditional AI sounding voice, the techno aspects of this character. And this movie can be brutal at times. There are some gory moments, some gory kills, but this movie just never feels like Chucky to me. It feels like it's missing the heart and soul of the franchise, which is Brad Dourif. There's no comedy here, there's no real one-liners, and this movie just kind of takes itself too seriously for me to really ever appreciate it as a Child's Play movie. But as a killer AI movie, it's okay. I just don't really think I'll ever watch this again. Coming in 7th for me is going to be Child's Play 3. And to me, this one's not bad. It's just super generic. Everything you love about Child's Play 1 and 2 is here. You do have an interesting attempt at a bigger finale than number 2, but the carnival setting isn't that great in my opinion. It's okay. The characters aren't great, the acting dips in quality. The military school setting doesn't do much for me. It's a pretty bland setting. There are a couple of interesting kills, especially at the beginning. Chucky's re-entry into the franchise after dying multiple times is pretty good. It's an okay opening scene. After that, to me, it is just a very forgettable movie. And Brad Dourif does have some good one-liners in here, but other than that, this is a pretty standard Child's Play movie. It feels more like Child's Play to me than the remake, so I put it higher, but this is arguably the most boring, standard, formulaic movie they've ever made in this franchise. And coming in 6th place is going to be Seed of Chucky. Now, I know a lot of people hate this movie, and I don't blame you. This is a weird one, and it's the weirdness that I do actually like more than Child's Play 3. This movie is over the top in every way. It completely crosses over into campy comedy. It also messes with a lot of the rules of the franchise. This is one that just really feels out of place with everything else. And with that emphasis on comedy and camp, the horror takes a backseat. There are still a couple of good kills, but for the most part, this is a straight up comedy and has some things that you wouldn't really ever expect from dolls in a movie. If it wasn't Brad Dourif and Jennifer Tilly doing the voices of Tiffany and Chucky in this movie, I don't think it would work at all. I appreciate what Don Mancini was trying to do with some Hollywood commentary here. I mean, Jennifer Tilly is really funny in this movie. This movie is undeniably funny, but a lot of times it's hard to tell if it's funny because it's so ridiculous and bad, or if it's actually witty. You're laughing at both, which I think definitely hampers this movie. So now we've made it through the ones that I think are not very good to the ones that are just kind of eh. And we're gonna start with number 5 here, and it's going to be Curse of Chucky. Now, I know a lot of people are big fans of Curse of Chucky, but I generally found it underwhelming. As for the horror aspects of Child's Play, they are back here, and this movie has some really gruesome kills. Now, one of the problems, though, with that is you know the killer is Chucky the whole time because this is a Chucky movie. So it loses a little bit of its suspense in the murder mystery aspect. The murder mystery really only exists for the characters in the movie. It's not really an intriguing plot line for this movie. And so in a lot of ways, I was left just kind of wanting. The characters here are also not great. There are a lot of annoying traditional slasher type characters. The Chucky design in this movie is also awful. This is my least favorite Chucky design easily. I mean, outside of the remake, which I don't even really think about as Chucky. I really don't know what they were doing with the animatronics. The puppeteering on his face just looks really off. I didn't like that design at all, and the hair also looks really bad to me. Brad Dourif returns, and he actually gets some great moments playing Charles Lee Ray, and you do get some interesting backstory and additions to the lore around the franchise, but it really is the return to horror, some of the lore additions, and the performance of Fiona Dourif, who does a good job as the new protagonist Nika, that I think elevates it over something like Child's Play 3, because other than that, this is a pretty standard slasher. But if you're into the Chucky franchise already, I think this is a worthwhile addition and one that certainly takes a step above kind of the mediocre lower half of this franchise. That means coming in at number 4 for me is Cult of Chucky. This is a more controversial take, I think, on this list. It seems like generally people don't like this one as much as Curse, and certainly don't put it higher than some of the lower entries I've had on my list, but I actually enjoyed some of the wacky new powers in this. And yeah, if you're into the Chucky lore and the rules of the world, this just goes crazy with it. For me, slasher franchise, it's hard to really get too invested in what the rules of the world are. This is just an insane Chucky movie, and I think some of the dumb explanations for some of his new powers kind of fit into the mold of this world. But having multiple Chuckies I thought was actually kind of a cool angle. This was a fun movie, certainly has quite a few violent kills as well. One of the things though that frustrates me is where Curse of Chucky, even though it is a lower budget straight to DVD movie, it felt a little bit more than its budget. It looked a little bit better. This movie, the way it's shot, the color palette on it, this feels like a straight to DVD movie, unfortunately, and you can never really escape that it is a cheap movie. But once again, Brad Dourif and Fiona Dourif carry this movie. The acting is better than it really should be from leads in a straight to DVD movie. I think this is actually a relatively decent Chucky movie. I still wouldn't say it's great. It's still meh to me, but I like this one more than Curse because it is so different. So now we're going beyond the meh and the bad, and we're getting into the stuff that I think is actually pretty good. And interestingly enough, these movies are all really good for their own reasons. And we're going to start off with my number 3, which is going to be Bride of Chucky. Bride of Chucky is directed by Ronnie Yu, who would eventually go on to direct Freddy vs. Jason. And this is certainly a late 90s, early 2000s style horror movie. And in the aftermath of Scream, which came out 2 years before this, there's a lot of added comedy into Bride of Chucky. And where the comedy can go over the top in Seed of Chucky, to me, it's pretty much just right here. This is still a pretty ridiculous movie, but I think the whole whodunit within the characters of this movie actually does work this time. There's an interesting little tension created between a husband and wife duo because Chucky and Tiffany are killing people and they don't really know who is killing them. They think either one of them could be the killer. They don't think it's the killer dolls that are in their car. And this is a road trip movie, which is also quite fun for the Chucky franchise. The introduction of Tiffany is one of the best parts. Jennifer Tilly is so good in these movies and she's so funny, and the character of Tiffany really works. It's a surprise because, you know, in the vein of classic Universal monster movies, the entire thing about having a bride for Chucky, a wife for Chucky, that doesn't necessarily seem like it could work that well, but it actually does, and they play off each other so well. Brad Dourif and Jennifer Tilly have such a good chemistry. The writing is also quite sharp. This is some of Don Mancini's best comedic writing in the entire series, and it's certainly worth a watch, and it does still have some pretty good gruesome horror kills, so definitely check out Bride of Chucky if you haven't. So that takes us to the top 2, and these are actually very difficult for me to pick. I love both of them for their own reasons, but coming in at number 2 for me is going to be Child's Play, the original from 1988, directed by Tom Holland. One of the things I love about Child's Play is, to me, it is a great horror movie with some good one-liners, and it really utilizes its concept of the killer doll extremely well. And Brad Dourif is just so good as Chucky. The start of Chucky's journey here. I'm somebody who loves first movies and origins, and the start of the Chucky series, the Child's Play franchise here. It doesn't get much better than this for a first movie in a late 80s slasher franchise. We also have to talk about the incredible animatronics around the Chucky doll, which is one of the reasons this film works so well. We take it for granted in the way they progress throughout the franchise, but if they didn't hit a home run right off the bat with the way they made Chucky work, this movie, this whole series would have never really gotten off the ground. And I also like the way they attempt to build on psychological horror. There's a good amount of tension between whether Andy is the killer or Chucky is the killer, and the apartment setting is more claustrophobic than some of the other settings we've seen in a lot of the other Chucky movies. So overall, this is one of my favorite first movies in a horror franchise, and in the 80s, when you didn't have as much intentional comedy in your horror films, Child's Play is certainly a breath of fresh air, especially when you're binging a lot of the iconic slashers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So coming in at number 1 for me is going to be Child's Play 2, directed by John LaFia, coming out 2 years later in 1990. Child's Play 2 does a great job of building on the original. Like I said earlier, it's very close for me with both of these, but this one goes for it a bit more. There are more kills, more gruesome deaths, more violence, and more action. This is a movie that, now that the cat's out of the bag that Chucky is a murderous doll, this movie utilizes Chucky more. We have more Chucky moments, more Chucky one-liners. You also have Andy building off of the original movie, experiencing the trauma, but now having to be in a foster family. There's a lot of consequences in this movie, and a lot of times we see horror sequels just completely ignore what came before and redo everything. And while there are similar beats in this movie, this one really goes for it. And Brad Dourif is really allowed to ham it up as Chucky here. There's a lot more one-liners. And of course, we have to talk about the finale, which is in the Toy Factory. It's one of the great horror finales of all time, one of the great horror final locations in any horror movie ever. It's such a fun sequence, and the way Chucky just keeps coming back over and over and over again. It's the most, to me, Chucky's ever felt like Freddy or Jason or Michael, where he just feels unstoppable. There's a lot to him in this, where in some other movies you see people throw him around or kick him or easily beat him. Here, he is constantly on the attack. So those are my Chucky rankings. What do you guys think of the Chucky movies or the Child's Play franchise? Have you watched them? Let me know which ones are your favorites and least favorites down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, I have more horror lists coming out here in the week leading up to Halloween, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.